This is the 4-year story of one of my favorite bucks of all time, a buck named Riblet.
Let's go! He's nice.
Now that's a giant.
Finally happened.
Oh man. Wow. Look at the payoff.
Yeah, buddy. We did it.
Our story with this buck started back in early November 2020 when he started popping up on our trail cameras in the southwest pasture. He was a good-looking young 10-point with a lot of potential. Shortly after, during rifle season, Andy and I had a couple encounters with this buck in the Green Pond Valley, about 3/4 of a mile east of the southwest pasture. Seeing him in person several times, we knew he could be something pretty special, and we'd hoped he'd stick around. Luckily, he made it through the rifle season, and he was pretty regular on the cameras and the feeders into January 2021. Throughout the spring and summer of 2021, I kept expecting him to show up on the Next Level Deer Supplements feed and mineral sites in the southwest pasture, but he never did. Throughout September, I spent most of my time hunting the new arrowhead plot that we had built that spring for a giant 5-year-old that we'd known since 2018 that I called Prospect. With no ag fields within 3 miles of the arrowhead plot on our side of the river, we were pulling in more and more deer to the Nebraska plot by the week. Finally, in early October, a beast of a 4-year-old 9-point showed up on the plot, and I knew instantly that it was that same young 10 from last year. He lost his G4 on the right, and his G4 on the left was barely an inch, but his frame exploded and he had a ton of mass. At this point, he still had no name, but he reminded me a lot of an old buck that I'd watched for several summers on an alfalfa field several miles away. I always referred to that buck as Rib Cage because of the frame shape. So wanting to keep the names similar, I posted pictures of each of these bucks on our social media stories and asked our friends for name suggestions for this new 4-year-old along the same lines as Rib Cage. Several people came up with the same name, but I've got to give credit to the first one, my buddy Carter Kiefer. From this point on, this buck would be known as Riblet. There were several other good name suggestions, but Riblet was too perfect. I ended up having several awesome encounters with Riblet on the arrowhead plot in October and November, and I even had him feed within a few yards of the bale blind right at dark, keeping me stuck in the blind for over an hour after dark until him and the rest of the deer fed away. With it being the first year of that plot, I started noticing that most of the deer weren't getting there until dark or after, and were actually coming up the river saddles about a half-mile south. So one night in the end of October, I sat on a hill and watched over the arrowhead plot and the saddles to try to find a closer ambush point. Shortly before dark, Riblet, a 5-year-old we called the Imposter, and a 3-year-old that we now knew as Kickstand, all came up the same saddle together, and I got to watch them circle around each other and push each other off. Right at dark that night, a random giant also came up the same saddle, and that would start the craziest deer story of my life with a giant buck that would become known as Edward Scissorhead. If you haven't seen the story of Scissorhead, I highly suggest watching it, and I'll put the video link to that in the description of this video below. As you watch this story of Riblet unfold, you'll learn how much the success of both of these deer are tied together. So fast forward a couple weeks into November, during rifle season, I was able to kill that 5-year-old buck in the southwest pasture that we called the Imposter. Andy was able to kill the Perfect 10 in the Green Pond Valley, and Carson was also able to kill a new Big 10 in the Green Pond Valley. Prospect was also killed on opening weekend that year by one of our neighbors. All of these hunts are also available to watch on our channel besides Prospects, so I suggest you check those out as well. With our success of rifle season and the scissorhead buck disappearing just as soon as he showed up, I didn't have any intentions of hunting another deer that season, until the end of November when scissorhead showed back up on the cameras, but only at night. After those pictures, I started scouting heavily again and ended up bumping scissorhead and several other bucks out of this tiny little tree pocket that we now call Ed's room. I hung a camera and a stand in that little pocket that same day, and over the next week and a half into December, I got several pictures of Riblet, scissorhead, and several other bucks using it as a bedroom. On December 9th, while I was sitting in Ed's room, Riblet was the first buck to come down into the pocket that morning. Shortly after, on the most intense deer hunt of my life, I was able to shoot scissorhead at 12 yards while Riblet and another buck stood 50 yards away. Riblet stuck around that year into late December, and I had high hopes of him becoming the #1 target in 2022 at 5 years old. In spring of 2022, while my buddy Austin Otis and I were out shed hunting, Austin was able to find one of Riblet's sheds from his 3-year-old year in 2020. Expecting him to do the same as he did in 2021, there were no sightings of Riblet on any of the cameras throughout summer, September, and most of October. The last week of October, I went out to the southwest pasture to check trail cameras, and finally, on October 23rd, Riblet made his first appearance back as a giant mainframe 8-point with even more mass and a deep split right G2. I couldn't have been more excited to see him back until I checked the next camera and saw that on the very next morning he was back on that one and he had broken off the entire split G2. At that point, I knew it would be best to take the risk of passing him the rest of that season and hope that he would come back even bigger the next year as a 6-year-old. Almost by pure miracle, Riblet was able to make it through another rifle season and had broken off several more tines by mid-December. With another major drought that year in 2022, the #1 goal was to load the deer up with as much feed and mineral as possible after rifle season to keep them healthy throughout the winter. Riblet became more regular than ever throughout December on the feed sites, but just like he'd done in years past, he was gone again by January. He stuck to his yearly pattern in 2023 and was a no-show throughout the summer, September, and most of October while I hunted another 5-year-old buck that we now called Kickstand. But just like clockwork, on October 25th, Riblet made his first appearance back in the southwest pasture. Bigger than ever at 6 years old, he was a massive, clean 8-point, and he went straight back to the top of my list. With perfect weather and wind for the 26th, I knew exactly where I wanted to be, Ed's room. I got set up in the tree that morning, well before daylight, and was hoping to have a good sit, but I was not expecting what was about to happen. At first light, I heard an angry buck grunt west of me, looked over, and saw a big-bodied deer quickly closing the distance. I picked up the binos and couldn't believe my eyes. It was Riblet at 80 yards, marching his way in, grunting, looking for a doe. I couldn't get my main camera arm around that side of the tree and had no good shooting lanes in that direction. I hit record on both GoPros, and before I knew it, Riblet was at 25 yards, and he was heading into my main shooting lane. I thought for sure it was about to happen until he stopped behind the last cedar at 20 yards, turned around, and started working his way back south into the brush. In a last-ditch effort and knowing how aggressive of a deer he was, I snort-wheezed at him hoping to turn him around. He stopped at 35 yards, snort-wheezed right back at me, and started tearing up a scrape, raking his antlers in the tree. With how fired up he was, I thought for sure he was about to turn and come back in, but he turned around again and walked back down the draw to the south away from me. Knowing he would try to circle downwind of me, I swung my camera arm around to my only shooting lane straight south.
I don't know if it's too dark for the GoPro. I have 3 cameras going. I've never shot this way. He circled downwind. I saw him come over here to the left. I was about to start glassing. It was barely light enough to shoot. I was about to start glassing, and I saw a body come and I knew it was a buck. I threw the binos up and instantly saw that it was Riblet. I'm in here for hammer kickstand. He came in and he was at 35 yards for a while, and he was working like he was gonna come right down the trail in here where he's supposed to come. But a lot of the bucks, when they're checking this pocket, don't actually come into it. They circle around downwind of me, but I don't have a tree over there. But I have a small shooting lane, and then he turned and started going back down around. I snort-wheezed at him twice. He got all pissed off, made a scrape, and was grunting, circled around to the south of me. So I had to turn around, swing my bow around, move the camera over here. I think the camera caught where he was. I'm not even 100% sure. I had the GoPro on the bow rolling, the second camera rolling, and the main camera rolling. Shot him at 30, and he's piled up within 100 yards. I already see him. He's laying dead up here at like 70 yards. That arrow looks perfect. Arrow's right here. Shot him from right up there. You can see my tree arm still in the tree. And he's laying dead right there.
Wreck did its job, as always. That's a pretty sight. Oh my. Oh, that exit is perfect. Holy crap, he's such a stud. Oh my. Blood splattered all over his antlers. He's so heavy. Unreal. Holy crap. I'm gonna set this camera on my pack and get some good recovery video of him. Look at that exit. Wreck tore him up. This deer is an absolute giant 8-point. We've been passing this deer since 2020. Last year he was actually on the list. He showed up with a big split G2 and then the next day broke it off. So I took him off the list. He just showed back up yesterday morning. Oh my, that's such a giant 8. I could not be happier with that. Look at this thing. Unreal. I want to give a big thanks to my good buddies Carson Detman and Bo Proviance for coming out that morning and sharing the excitement with me, taking pictures, and helping me get him out of the bottom of the canyon. Those memories are priceless. These stories aren't fully closed to me until the deer are on the wall, so now we'll head to Jacket Taxidermy Studios and watch my buddy Justin Jacket work his magic and bring Riblet back to life. Closing the chapter on these deer, especially with so many years of history, is always such a bittersweet feeling. We spend so much time watching, growing, and hunting these deer that means so much more to us than just killing one and putting the meat in the freezer. It's truly sad when the story is over, but thankfully we get to relive the memories for the rest of our lives through these videos and seeing them on the wall. The bright side is, there's always more work to do and another story in the making. I want to say thank you to everyone who's been a part of this life we get to live and all the help along the way. It means so much more to us than we could ever put in words. We may be closing the story of Riblet, but there are many more to come, so we'll see you on the next one. Thanks for watching.